I invite our session chairperson and moderator of this session, Mr. Gaurav Kharod, Managing Director, Sales Intelsat. So please join the dice for the start the session.
Good morning, everyone. So this session is about emerging multimedia broadcasting solutions. I'm Gaurav Kharod. We will start the session first by inviting the panelists here. I'll first invite Mr. Vyas, Mr. M. N. Vyas. He's the chairman and managing director for Planetcast Media Services. I'll invite Mr. Ben Wine from the satellite company, SES. Mr. Paul Febvre, I hope I pronounce his name right. He comes from the UK and he represents a technology and research company called Catapult. And we've got Mr. Sachin, who represents the new age application providers for the last mile operators in India, a company called Corpus. And I represent Intelsat, which is into several services, but primarily a satellite operator, which does distribution of media content in India. So how we are going to structure this panel is I'm going to have a couple of minutes to introduce so far as media broadcasting is concerned, etc. So let me give my opening remarks on the topic. We are talking about the classical satellite television broadcasting as a solution which has been existing for the last 20, 30 years, not just in India, globally. I would want to bring focus to where satellite distribution is in India and what is the media and entertainment industry that is existing today. Some numbers from the FICCI report, which is a very famous report on media and entertainment business in India. And I'm not specifically referring only to satellites, but media and entertainment in general. The report for 2022, which means the numbers are for the year ending March 2021, tells us that the media and entertainment industry in India is a $21.5 billion industry. And this is despite the fact that it has not even reached the levels of 2019, which was pre-COVID. So there was a big hit to the industry because of advertisement slump in the last 2 years because of COVID lockdowns. And we've not even recovered to the levels of 2019 as yet. The industry is growing at a CAGR aggregate growth rate of 13% over the last 5 years. We are likely to see huge growth across this media and entertainment sector in the next 5 years. And by early next year, we should be going above the pre-COVID numbers overall. Out of the total media and entertainment segment, which has several subsectors like streaming video, digital media, television, OTT, animation, live events, gaming, etc. The television industry, which is where we are focusing on, has been growing in the last 1 year at about 5%. And it is the largest part of this media and entertainment business of the 21.5 billion. It is the largest component of the industry. However, the fastest growing segments is definitely not the television industry. It's growing at a rate of 5%, but the fastest growing segments are the relatively smaller subsectors of gaming or live events and even the digital media. So the digital media industry or the OTT or the streaming part of the industry is growing at a much faster rate of more than 20%. But that said, it is still about 2.5 times smaller. The digital media segment is still about 2.5 times smaller in size compared to the traditional television distribution medium that we all have. And I think that is the key focus area as to how does traditional distribution of television content today get impacted over time as the growth rates slow down on linear television and the growth rates on digital media consumptions go up. And it's already rising at a rate of 20% aggregate over the last few years. So how does that impact the traditional business? And I think that is the focus of the discussion that we'll have today. Just to add some more color to this, it is not as if traditional TV is dying soon. There is a huge market in India. India is probably the largest market globally, which will sustain the onslaught of new age digital media. And that's going to be one of the key topics of discussion as to how long do we see the traditional linear television distribution market continuing and even growing to some extent in markets like India. From a perspective standpoint, the current media and entertainment market in India has 898 television channels. The MIB secretary in the previous, in the keynote session in the morning talked about how there is growth potential. I'll just come to that. 898 TV channels licensed, which are being distributed over C-band satellites over India, about 70 transponders on satellites being used to distribute these channels across Indian satellites, across foreign satellites. There are 5 DTH operators, including the government operated Prasar Bharati's DD free dish. There are 4 private operators. Between the DTH operators, the pay TV DTH operator or private DTH operators, there is a 70 million household which are being addressed by the DTH operators. DD free dish addresses around 40 to 42 million households. So that's a total of 112 million households being addressed by DTH. There is close to 90 million households being addressed by the cable industry, which is where there is a host of around 17 to 1800 large MSOs and maybe 20 to 30,000 smaller cable operators. So the overall industry, the media and entertainment industry is large, supporting 200 million households today. And as the MIB secretary just mentioned, there is a potential to now provide television, and of course there's new technology coming, which will allow television channels to be broadcast to mobile handsets. And I think that increases the market from 200 million households to maybe 800 million smartphones that will be available to all of us on an individual basis. So there is potential. Satellite has a role to play in that growth as well. And that's some of the things that we are going to discuss as part of this panel. So with that as a backdrop, I'm going to take my seat, act as a moderator, start asking questions to each of the panelists. And eventually, if we have time towards the end, we will invite questions from the learned audience. Mr. Christopher has already mentioned that he's going to ask some very difficult questions to all of us. So we'll look forward to that.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello.
Okay, so to start the ball rolling, I will ask from Ben onwards, going this way, each of the speakers to take turns. Keep the mic close to your mouth so that you can be heard. Introduce yourself and your company and the products and services that you are into so that we all know where we are.
Thanks, Gaurav. Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Vine. I'm heading the Asia Pacific region for video in SES. I think most of you probably know SES, so I won't take too much time on introducing who we are and what we're doing. We're a global satellite operator. We have more than 70 satellites up in the skies in various shapes and forms. We are distributing, in the context of this discussion, we're distributing more than 8,000 channels, and we have a host of different services around the media and broadcast industry. In India, as I'm sure a lot of you know, we've been active in the media and broadcast industry since the beginning, I would say, but probably 2004, I guess, was the beginning for SES. And We are actively serving today 2 of the DTH operators that Gaurav mentioned before. You probably know that as well, Airtel Digital and Dish TV. And we are doing our best to be active in promoting the Indian space during these events and participating in the industry as much as we can. We are also active in multi-orbit, and I believe some of you might have heard Deepak Mathur, our Executive Vice President, talk about that in one of the keynote addresses. I would also mention that we are actively looking to add and increase the type of services we can provide to the media and broadcast industry, and allowing our customers and the ecosystem to get closer to the edge, closer to the consumer. Gaurav mentioned the satellite services directly to the handset and so on. We are doing everything we can to be part of these ecosystems and provide space, I would say, for new companies, startups, and new technologies to come into effect in that aspect. That's in a nutshell where we're coming from. We'll probably dive into more details as the discussion progresses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. My name is Febvre. I'm Chief Technology Officer at the Satellite Applications Catapult. I've been working in the satellite industry for nearly 40 years. I started my career at British Telecom Research Labs. The group I was working in was working on one of the first generations of digital TV codecs. The technology then was called D2 SMAC. We don't have this anymore. One of the things that happened in that early days is actually a very pragmatic approach towards delivering television services via satellites took place to actually lower the cost of the consumer premises equipment. In the UK, we had a technology called the Squarial, which was fitted on the side of the house, and it had a digital TV receiver, a set-top box behind it, but it was expensive. And then we had the use of PAL over simple satellites, straight into the back of the TV through a down converter, and it just swept across the country and the world. And today we have, of course, satellite TV, digital satellite TV, not analog satellite TV, because of the penetration and the critical mass of volume. And that's the history. The other work that I was doing at BT was actually on digital communication systems for mobile platforms. I built the first Inmarsat-C mobile terminal for Inmarsat-C, Safety of Life Service, with the massive data rate of 600 bits per second. Okay? This was to provide telex services to mariners, saving lives. It meant you didn't have to have a radio operator. I'm just giving you the context. We're now 1 million times faster over satellites in 30 years. That system, though, saved many lives. It put a lot of people out of jobs. In British Telecom, we had 50 Morse code operators in a coastal radio station controlling all the shipping coming out of in the UK waters, right? That didn't close until 1999. Just think how fast the world has changed in this time. So a little bit about the background context. I then moved to Inmarsat to develop the next generation of Inmarsat-C, but I was already an internet enthusiast. And my role in Inmarsat was design authority, technical design authority for our digital systems. So this is the BGAN system, Swift broadband system, Fleet broadband system, and its subsequent generations. One of the key aspects there is this was a third generation mobile technology. And during that evolution, there was a battle going on. In fact, there were 2 battles going on. The first battle was between the telecoms industry and the IT industry. What we were seeing is a competition for dominance in whether it was going to be an internet, open wireless internet type service, or whether it was going to be a telecoms type service. Now, of course, we have complete convergence. Telecoms operators embrace the internet technology, and they embrace it for 2 reasons. Firstly, the ubiquity of access and the low cost, and secondly, that it reduces the cost of their infrastructure. The other battle that took place was the battle for the handheld consumer broadband and consumer broadcast technology. We had the digital video broadcast systems, which have been enormously successful in creating hundreds of television channels across satellites, but also for digital TV. During that time, during the last 15, 20 years, we've also seen the transition towards, well, what would the handheld technology look like? The digital video broadcast for handheld. And in fact, even the digital video broadcast for satellite handheld, DVB-SH. These are standards which exist. Are they successful? No, of course they're not successful. So there's two failure stories here, right? The original failure of digital TV and then the dominance of digital TV. The original failure of digital broadcast to handheld because of the ubiquity of the devices that people carry with them. And this has created a total transformation in the way that people expect to see their content delivered, what they would like to have. And it is no longer about only consuming the content that is offered. It is about creating content and consuming content that's your choice. This is a major, major transformation. The satellite industry has grown because of the demand for satellite TV. It is the bedrock of our industry. But we need to be careful about not being a dinosaur. We need to embrace the future. We need to make sure that the systems of the future deliver services that the customers expect, and that is a shift from broadcast to broadband. There are a few key technologies that are now being developed in 5G and moving forward into 6G that we must embrace in the satellite world. Because if we don't, we won't exist. But there are great opportunities here for convergence, for exploitation of the spectrum bands in a coordinated fashion, and to deliver services that are really needed to reduce the digital poverty that exists in society today, and to make sure that everyone has a great future. Maybe during the session I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing in Catapult. I didn't talk about my third part of my career. I was in Inmarsat for 19 years. But 10 years ago I was asked by the UK government to set up a research organisation called a Catapult in the UK. One of 9. We're the only one in the space sector. And we're working in every aspect of the satellite systems and services, everything from Earth observation to alternative PNT systems and communications. We're the test house in the UK for OneWeb, for some of the integration of systems. But we're looking beyond that at how do we create full direct-to-handset or direct-to-consumer 5G non-terrestrial networks, which must have a recognition of the fact that consumers want to have access to content at scale. Thank you.
I'm very honored to sit next to Mr. Paul. Great background, thank you. My name is Sachin Tummala. I'm founder of Corpus Enterprises. A company started in Dallas, Texas, like a long time back. I made a career move to India. As a background, I had seen the telecom transformation, the baby bells merging into Ma bells and transforming into triple play, quad play companies and to media companies and cloud companies and all that stuff. And I came to India. I saw an opportunity in India where the market is very fragmented. I addressed the last mile opportunity. If we standardize the platform in the last mile and can enable the ecosystem, I saw an opportunity in enhancing revenue streams and relevance for those local entrepreneurs. So if you look at any household, apart from the digital spend is growing. I mean, it's not just internet, it's e-commerce, it's education, everything, telemedicine, all the stuff that we're talking about, most of it is happening through digital platforms. And none of this revenue is coming to the last mile. So our vision is to enable the last mile operator by helping him deliver these services by bundling along with internet and broadcast. So we have about 1 million homes so far. We partnered with about 10,000 franchisees. And as Gaurav said, the opportunity is much bigger. There are about 30 to 40,000 operators all across India. Our vision is to deliver multiple digital services to the home in partnership with the last mile. And in the process, we are innovating technology as well as business models. Because most of these guys, they don't have funding, they don't have balance sheets. So we organize the hardware, software, content, and also funding sources for the last mile operators to scale their business. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Vyas. In fact, we started a company called Planetcast almost 20 years ago. Today, we really operate more than 300 TV channels. We are almost second to Prasar Bharati in the country. Our objective is to create an ecosystem for broadcasters to reach out to the last mile as well as to the consumers. So our new approach is basically we are creating ecosystem for the broadcasters and the content owners to really monetize their content with the ecosystem of direct to consumer. And that's where I think our next journey for next 10, 15 years will be focusing onto that. We have a great relationship with satellite because that's where we started our businesses, and satellite broadcasting is something which is key to our success so far in the entire business. And we feel that yes, we will keep on harnessing the omni strength of satellite broadcast for years to come, because we have seen, in fact, the last Friday match or Sunday match, only satellite broadcast can give the smiles. Nobody else, no other medium could have given you that kind of smile what we got when India won the match. So I think it is very important for us to really take this BSS word very seriously. This is the only medium which is going to really support us, even any time, every time. And I think I'm a little biased because it has really helped us in creating our company, but still I feel that this is the only medium which will serve the media industry for a long, long time. And we are definitely looking forward for development into this. When we started, as Mr. Paul has said, when we started it was MPEG 2, there was only 20, 30 channels. When we really looked at the business model of Doordarshan, it was 1 or 2 channels per transponder, and those were the days. Now we have at least packing 50, 60, 100 channels per transponder. So those are the advantages which we have to really take it up and invest into these technologies so that we can harness the advantages of the BSS satellite. And our objective is only in that direction, that yes, create a great ecosystem for
outside providing services on satellite. We've got Sachin, who is the last mile enabler for delivery of content of various kinds, not just linear distribution, but streaming, apps, etc. And we've got Paul, who's an expert in the technology domain for the industry. So I think we got a great panel, and I'm going to start asking some questions. Of course, I'll lay a little bit of a background to each of my questions. So let me first start, and while I transfer that over, let me first start from the satellite angle. As Mr. Vyas said very nicely, he's a great proponent for satellite services. Satellite seems to have a long future in the traditional media space. It has been there for the last several decades, but it's still going to be there as linear television, though it is declining in reach or in offtake, and there are new consumer patterns which are moving towards OTT and streaming. My question to the panelists, and I would address this first to Ben, Paul, and then to Mr. Vyas, is What is the time frame that you see for linear television? Is it going to remain forever? Is it dying? How soon is it dying? How soon will it be overtaken by the streaming platforms, by OTT consumers, etc.? And so I think I'll pause there as the first question. I have a follow-on question as to what are the opportunities you see out of streaming and OTT as consumption patterns change, but we'll take that up as a second question. So first question, what is the timeline? How do you see satellite competing against alternate digital media in the time to come?
Thanks, Gaurav. So I think, this is this is a very interesting question, and we've been discussing this, I guess, for some time now. I think there's a notion that linear TV will go away and OTT will take over, and that's going to be the future. I think we're still some time from that. I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball if that's going to be 5 years or more. I think at least 5 years, to my opinion, that's the minimum. And I think it is mainly because, and I think Mr. Vyas really gave a great example, right, on the match this weekend, and these kind of consumption habits will not change. I think a lot of us, me included, certainly my kids, are moving toward watching more and more on mobile or handset on the go. But still, that experience of watching at home at a big screen is something that's not likely to go away so soon, if at all. I think also from the perspective of the addressable audience, the addressable communities that the television channels, that broadcasters are trying to reach, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that a lot of these still do not have reliable, affordable access to the access technologies that allows them to watch efficiently over mobile or over OTT. This is still not the case in large parts of the population, and we have to face that. So in my view, that's not something that's going to happen in less than 5 years. And I think there's always going to be some version of the linear consumption out there. And it's critical for us in the satellite industry to see how we can maintain our position and facilitate certainly the traditional type services, but also how do we get involved in facilitating the newer type of services, and I guess that will be part of the next questions.
So I'll just change the pattern a little bit. Why don't you take up the second part as well? Where do you see satellites and satellite as a distribution technology can come in into this new era?
Sure, and I think, satellite has, from the broadcast perspective, a very, very obvious advantage, right? You can distribute content very efficiently to mass areas, mass population, and so on. That is the core of what we can do very efficiently for broadcast and media consumption. And I think that will remain something that is needed. The consumer habits are changing. That's clear. And we have to adapt to serve the consumer whichever way they want, because that's going to happen whether we are part of it or not. But I think using satellite for feeding content to the edge, for example, is a clear case where we can still provide significant value to the operators, to the ecosystem, and facilitate the use of mobile and OTT services by bringing the content closer to the edge. I think we're all talking about 5G. 5G is great in many, many aspects, but the congestion that is there and will be there at the backbone level is something that I feel satellite is going to be critical in helping solve it. And we haven't talked about it before, but I'm sure you have some examples of technologies that are being looked at in order to facilitate that. And we are in SES already are involved in certain trials and proof of concepts and so on to facilitate this almost CDN in the sky, if you want to call it, if you're looking at this from the OTT perspective, the ability to provide the content to the edge without further congesting the core networks. In the example of the game, I think Deepak actually mentioned this on one of the sessions the other day. you know, if you think about two people sitting next to each other watching the same game in the OTT sphere, this is it cannot be more inefficient, right? Everybody is getting a unicast feed of the same content. This is not the way that networks should be used. And if we can bring the same game to the edge, and then everyone is consuming it locally, whether that's Wi-Fi in the home, whether that's, you know, within the last mile environment, I think that is where we can certainly play a major role. And lastly, I would say, in areas where there is no affordable infrastructure to support the OTTs and the new type of services, we are actually participating in initiatives like that to deliver content to your neighborhood store, if you want to call it, and having consumers being able to download that content and watch it without spending money and network, I would say, on accessing that content over their 4G at this case and so on. So I think there's a lot of room for us to play, but it's important, it's critical for us to be engaged and be involved in those conversations. Otherwise, it will not form the way we would like it to form.
Thank you, Ben. You may have stolen my thunder. I think we're looking at multiple convergence stories here, but really those convergence are being driven from trying to provide the services that the consumers want to have. So one of the convergences is the fixed mobile convergence. One of the other convergences is the terrestrial satellite convergence and broadcast broadcast broadband. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. I think what's really interesting is that the mobile operators are not blind to the opportunities of the four-play type of approach. So they are looking at how do they deliver services. First of all, the services that customers want in the way that they want to receive them on their devices or in their homes, and then you fix the technology afterwards. So the customer comes first, technology second. There are some key technologies that have been envisioned as providing the capabilities that customers need. Everything is moving over IP. Where however we like to see it, it's not just about native codecs anymore, it's over IP, because it gives flexibility for delivery. And one of the mechanisms to provide efficiency is to do broadcast and multicast IP. And within the terrestrial domain, it hasn't been successful to date, is the construct of providing multimedia broadcast and multicast services over terrestrial systems. Now, the driving factor for this historically has been there hasn't been enough density of users in a cell to actually make it worthwhile to put that costly, from a software perspective, infrastructure in place. But that's changing. And what I anticipate that we will see is because of the softwareization of the networks, because of virtual network functions, the softwares can be deployed where it's needed to deliver the efficiencies that's needed. You're absolutely right. If you've got the same content and you're in the same radio domain, you really want that one content to be consumed, the one radio bearer to be consumed and the content to be delivered. But you also want the ability to monetize it, to tune it to individual aspects. So do you have a subscription? Do I have a subscription? Maybe we only get access to it if we have the subscription, which is not a broadcast proposition, it's a multicast proposition. It's where you actually have selectable content to those users delivered efficiently. So I think that that is one of the key technologies that the mobile operators will be putting into effect to deliver services efficiently, and it is equally applicable in the satellite domain. So you can deliver content where it's needed. So I think we'll see that convergence taking place. Now, the question you were asking, sorry, I departed. This is a bit of a rabbit hole. I'm going to come back out of the rabbit hole, and you asked about time frames. I think one of the saving graces, stay of execution, we can call it, for the satellite broadcasting domain, is actually the increased bandwidth requirement for HDTV, 4K TV, 8K TV, and it consumes a lot of bandwidth and a lot of power. And satellites are still a really great means for delivering that content universally. But I think there's also the aspect of which entity are you delivering it to? And one of the other key technologies in the mobile domain is the concept of doing mobile multi-access edge computing, which is where you put a server, essentially, close to the customer at the radio head end. And what that means is you can cache information and you can deliver it when the customer wants it with minimum cost on the backhaul infrastructure, because you can preload out that information. Now, of course, if it happens to be the match, it's going to be in real time, but that can then be stored and accessed and pulled down when it's needed. So there's another key technology there that we will see. So it could well be that in people's homes, there is actually these devices are in their set-top boxes and things that allow them to cache the content, deliver it when it's needed. So I think we'll see that kind of convergence moving forward. So satellites are going to be critical for delivery of that content in real time and to do the backhaul, the content caching. But I think it will increasingly disappear into the background. The users won't know how the content is getting to them. They will just access it on their TV or on their devices. And I think that's one of the interesting things here, is that satellites are going to be crucial for the future, but you won't think of it as satellite TV anymore. You'll think of it as just the means, well, it's just the way I get my content. It could be over the internet, over my broadband local access, but it could be actually delivered from my set-top box. So I think it's a really interesting future. I think it will be IP, it will be broadcast and multicast capabilities, 5G and fixed and mobile convergence. Oh, the timeline, sorry. 5 years.
I want to add one angle to the timeline, and the urban users like us, we pretty much disconnected our cable or DTH services, right? Pretty much we are watching the linear content on the OTT platforms, because be it news or some of the entertainment content is already consolidated into the OTT platforms. But looks like a regulator stepped in, and the linear content is mostly regulated. And if the non-regulated OTT platforms are streaming the linear content, they're asking them to take that content away. So which means the news channels and some of the live broadcast is going to go back to the linear platforms. So that may probably stop some of these migration of these consumer and the behavior of cord cutting, be it DTH or be it a cable. So temporarily, but still, 5 years could be my guess too.
Yeah. So I'm listening to most of our panelists, and I completely disagree with them. That satellite has got absolute no replacement. Come whatever you may think, when we started, it was one transponder per channel. We were broadcasting some FM type of transmission. Today we are packing number of channels, but then there was a stage when we went to HD. Again, we had 10 to 12 channels per transponders. And if you see the appointment-based viewing, which is the key factor, which cannot be replaced by any technology. And I'm slightly confused about the term convergence. There is no convergence in technology. If there would have been a convergence, there would have been only one car, there would have been only one aircraft, there would have been only one chip. So there cannot be a convergence. Each application has got their own efficiencies, and that drives the technology. What is the efficiency factor which we are forgetting in broadcast is that transmission at the same instant. And that's what I was mentioning, that if the one run which yesterday Pakistan could not take was shown across the globe only by a satellite. No other medium can really show that. And similarly, what I'm perpetuating is, if there is a goal which is happening on a World Cup final, I think nobody would like to miss that. Now, if you see that kind of enthusiasm only on a 2D type of a viewing, you imagine that if we create a VR type of a viewing, that I'm unable to go, I have problems of traveling, or I can't go. And if you give him a VR headgear, and if he feels that yes, he's exactly there in this stadium, he's clapping, he is hearing voice of the crowd. You look at the experience, what it will be given to the customers. And we are really at Planetcast, we are really looking at those experiences to be given to the consumers. And that's where I think the technology will enable us to reap the benefits of and efficiencies of broadcast satellites. I will give you an example of OTT. A lot of things we're talking about OTT. In fact, in our company, we had a full group working on OTT, but not a single dollar has been earned by that OTT. Why? Because the technology is so inefficient that you can never make it work for this. So what the people have done, they've started getting into content. And that was the biggest joke which I said. Netflix is now known more as a content provider than a technology provider. So today, if I ask Gaurav and Mr. Vain, SES, to create a movie of George Lucas or somebody, and only one broadcast they will do on satellite, I'm sure they will make a lot of money than OTT platform. So it's essentially the efficiency which drives the technology across, and you will see the satellite technology will always be there, broadcasting will always be there onto this. Linear platforms are meant for activities which are happening and you want to be part of that at that instant. And that cannot be done by the other mediums. Yes, we will be in a driving car, but it's not a great efficient way to prompt a user to watch a match when he's driving a car. So these are something which are fads which are being created, and they are, I will say that these investments are harming the entire ecosystem of media deliveries. Rather than we should really focus on issues like ATSC 3.0, where you have a fixed frequency, you can really get onto this. So broadcast systems should be given priority. Rather than you have I will do 20 channels on 5G. What the great it will do. So number one, Wi-Fi or these wireless can never meet the aspirations of humans on media. It has to be connected. Any appointment, serious discussions or serious viewing or serious plays cannot be done on wireless. It has to be either a fixed satellite or it has to be on a wired network. We will have possibilities. We will have waves where we will feel that yes, we are going down, but suddenly you will find that if we are focused enough to really save these kind of efficiencies, then definitely we'll work towards that. Say today, why the VR experience is not good, because we are not trying to consume so many frames per second. If we have video formats which has got some 500 frames, 1000 frames, definitely the kind of availability and the experience what we'll get on a VR gear will be much smoother and much soother. And that's where I think the investments should be given. And I think the community is now realizing it also, and we should really see that, yes, the current format, you may find some change, but if Gaurav's question is that whether linear TV will be live, it will be live forever. Nobody can stop it. What was the second question? I just forgot.
Do you see more opportunities because of digital media and streaming?
Yes. The digital media opportunity is essentially for the contents which are never seen. And I think this is the advantage for say all the contents. You all must be having various groups of WhatsApp. And out of that WhatsApp videos, I think we must be liking 1 out of 100 videos. That, yeah, ye acha hai. Otherwise, all are crap. So these are mediums which are basically there for people who could not really show their. I'm not saying there are advantages also, because I think everybody now has got a power to monetize, which is the biggest advantage these OTT and the digital media has given. But if you see, if you add analytics, if you add, say, I want to see the real reaction of the players playing on the field. I don't want any graphics. I don't want any animation over that, which distract my say. I just want to, because I am not there at the stadium, I just want to see him. So these digital platforms, if they claim that yes, they will do some wonders on sports and other things, yes, they will do, but on the back end of the sports, but not onto this. So I think opportunities are there for digital media because of the infrastructure which has come. Say 5G will give opportunity to the contents which are canned contents. Yes, there will be opportunity, and that particular segment will shift from linear TV to digital. That is there, and that has started also. That a lot of people, all the libraries are now available on asking. You can see any movie whenever you want. So these are advantages which is not there by the linear TV that time. So I think that opportunity is there, and which is also quite substantial. But I think once, and thanks to COVID has really helped the digital media consumption, because there was no activity which was there, there was no live action was there. So I think next 2 years after the COVID, we will definitely see a change. And I'm pretty hopeful that yes, the linear thing has to really emerge as the most strongest media, which I think you have seen also, that the ad rates what we get on sports, you can never get. OTT platforms will never ever imagine in their lifetime. So I think that's the proof that which medium is better. But definitely, Gaurav, your question is, yes, we have a lot of opportunities which has opened because of digital media. And we are also working on that. And basically, we are also getting a lot of advantage out of that.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to take 1 minute to probably paraphrase what the speakers have said on this particular topic, and also add the Intelsat color, since I'm representing Intelsat and not just the moderator here. So I saw some of the key points which are mentioned. I think Ben mentioned content to the edge. Paul mentioned unicast versus multicast. And I am particularly with Mr. Vyas, bringing in the Indian perspective as well, that linear television is going to remain the mainstay in India. There is no way that broadband or terrestrial technologies, wireless or wired, is going to provide provide television, mass television content to 130 crore Indians across the country. Linear television has to continue. It has a long life. But yes, digital media opens up newer opportunities, and some of the opportunities which Ben mentioned was to identify how do we provide content to the edge through edge caching technologies, and these can be propelled by satellite as a backbone technology. So edge caching servers or content to the edge can be delivered by satellite, and therefore satellite has an opportunity to step into this new age digital media segment. To one of your points, maybe Paul and Ben, technology-wise, terrestrial networks are highly inefficient when delivering content to multiple users at the same time. I was watching a cricket match when I was traveling on my mobile phone recently, and there were like 1.3 crore unicast streams being viewed on a Hotstar. And that's a highly inefficient way of transmitting the same content to 1.3 crore handsets, each one of them on a unicast stream. And me and my colleague were in the same hotel, and both of us are watching unicast streams. And we could have been on a multicast, if not a broadcast. I'm sure there were several other people in the same hotel watching that match. And all of those could be on a content to edge kind of a solution or on a broadcast multicast solution. So yes, terrestrial technologies are highly inefficient in delivering especially real-time content. Probably there is a space for SVOD or VOD, video on demand content, where you have content to edge as an opportunity for satellite. But thanks for very interesting answers. I'm going to now turn to something that Sachin mentioned. Two things he mentioned which are very different from the other speakers. One was, and I don't want to get into that part, but I do want to mention highlight what he mentioned, which is regulated content versus unregulated content. So linear television today in India is regulated, and there is a proper regulatory mechanism under the Ministry of I&B which regulates content on linear television. So far, the streaming, the digital media streaming, the OTT platforms are unregulated or self-regulated, and I think that differentiates how both of these are consumed. If there is a standardization of regulation across both, because ultimately we are dealing with content, distribution is just a mechanism. The technology and the distribution part of it is just a mechanism of delivering the content. If there is common regulation across both sides, I think that's when we will start seeing that, what Mr. Vyas is saying, that linear television has a long way to go. It is the only medium which can survive potentially and deliver the best bang for the money that consumers spend. The one other point that Sachin mentioned, and I want to take that as a next question for all of us, which is, what are the value additions that the industry needs to provide? So from a satellite standpoint, from a technology standpoint, from last mile operator standpoint, from a distribution teleport standpoint, what are the value additions that need to go into these services that we provide today, which is the traditional linear TV channel? How can we enhance the value of a linear distribution platform? What are the value adds? So Ben, you go first. Do you provide any service on that?
Yeah, so I think this is a question we've been sort of dealing with for a long time, and where can we provide the additional value to those linear distributions? And I think I think there's more than one, and there's a few things we're working on, but one thing to mention is, there's two main drivers we always need to look at. One is the consumer behavior. The second one, which was mentioned here, but we didn't touch about it too much, is the monetization. At the end of the day, it's consumer behavior that drives actions, and it's the monetization. It's the fact that all of us and all of the related companies in the industry are commercial entities that need to make money. And in some of the examples that were addressed here, the OTTs and one of the buzzwords now, fast channels and all of this. This is very nice concepts and technologies and a lot of very interesting technologies, but is there really money there for the broadcasters or whoever is investing the money in producing the content to be gained? And I think there's a lot of different answers to this, but basically most of them are saying not really. And for me, one of the interesting angles is, are we able to improve the monetization options for the linear channels, for the broadcasters, for the content creators at the end, to be opening up avenues for them to monetize better on top of the linear distribution that we're doing today. And it's not and the reason I'm mentioning this is because I don't have a clear ready-made solution for it, but I do think that this is a nut that if we crack has super value for us as satellite operators. There's been and there are solutions around ad replacements and customization or personalization of ads based on edge technologies combined with satellite distribution. We're working on a lot of solutions like that, but I think for me this is one of the drivers. There's many other drivers. I think there's key drivers around facilitating content to the edge and so on, but I did want to mention something that was less, let's say, in the mainstream.
Paul?
Yeah, it's a great question. Of course, I work in a research organisation, not in well, I was at Inmarsat for 20 years. I think though that what we need to reflect on some of the big changes that are taking place. You know, what kind of monetization mechanisms exist today in the wider internet? And of course, it's not the internet service providers really that are doing this. It's actually the big players who actually control the content and the identity of the users, and the actual provide the support services for actually retail, for instance, and advertising over the top. I think there's a distinction here between the infrastructure deployment and because without infrastructure you've got no services. So, and what is that infrastructure going to enable in terms of delivery of consumer services or enterprise services, and how are those monetized ultimately? We're seeing some significant moves by big players into the satellite arena. You know, you look at Amazon with Kuiper, for instance. Well, it's not because they just want to do satellites. They want to find new ways of accessing customers and monetizing their product portfolio. Same for Google, same for others as well. I mean, just look at the today announced, Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter. What does that mean? You know, what is it going to mean for Starlink services and things? And are you going to see vertical integration and things? So I think we need to separate out the way of delivering the infrastructure and the services to the customers and the monetization of those. We'll always have that kind of tension of going up and down the stack. So I'm not going to be able to answer this. However, I'll put one other point on the table. Maybe Mr. Vyas, I could just respond to your rightly contented about convergence piece, because maybe it's about a integration of technologies that customers don't care at the end of the day. But I think you'd mentioned one other point, which I think is a really interesting one, which is about people in vehicles. Yeah? As we're moving, we're seeing major changes in the transport infrastructure, electrification of the road networks to reduce pollution and to lower the overall carbon impact of humanity. But we're also seeing a shift to autonomy, you know, to drive safety. The biggest risk on the road is not the vehicles going wrong, it's the people behind the wheel driving them, right? Those are actually, even today, the autonomous vehicles are safer than the human vehicle. And the transition will be driven by insurance, right? As soon as it's recognized by the insurance industry that when the car's in automatic mode, actually you're going to pay less per mile, then the risk will shift and everyone will move. To the point where now there is no driver. There's everyone's a passenger. What are they going to do, right? They're going to do work, or they're going to look at their content. And I think there's significant changes that we'll see therefore in terms of delivering services to the vehicle, through the vehicle to the passenger. And I'd just like to reflect on that, because it does change perhaps where the satellites could be delivering services to those vehicles when they're everywhere, because you simply can't deliver over the terrestrial infrastructure necessarily. One last point, if I may. Sure. It's about the cost, the energy cost of delivering content, right? Every single bit has some energy associated with it. If you go faster, you consume more energy because you're consuming more bits. Power goes up, the infrastructure costs go up. We're already seeing that the cost to the mobile operators is dominated by their capital investment and their operational cost for the infrastructure beyond the metropolitan areas. Yeah? This is massive. Already we have operators wondering how are they going to pay the bills, right? Energy costs are going up. How are they going to get access? And I think we've got a real opportunity here. When I said 5 years, I'm not talking about 5 years and no satellites. I'm talking about 5 years and the satellites being part of the delivery infrastructure for the next way in which we deliver services to customers. Thank you.
In the interest of time, I'll just summarize in 2 points. The value add that we are giving as a last mile platform to the operator is one is bringing interactivity, because linear content is not just entertainment, but it could be education or healthcare or other fields. So by bringing an element of interactivity, you are enhancing the quality of the content. And the second thing is we are enabling the content on multi-screen, because the eyeballs are shifting from TV to mobile or web or tablet, whatever. So as a last mile platform, if you provide these capabilities, our last mile operator is staying at least relevant and controlling the element of churn that is happening in the market and enhancing his ARPU.
Yeah. My views on the value add is basically we can add, as Mr. Van has said, on the edge we can really drop the signals, and then we can create a lot of value to the consumer, because that's very important for broadcasters as well as the other content distributors, that you have to take care of the viewing habits of Gen Z and whatever is coming up. And I think looking at that, I think that plays a very important role, that yes, we will have to change the last mile model, and that's where I think the real value of distribution lies. And I think as our company are also working on various solutions on that. The other value add is basically to, as I mentioned in my earlier comment, is that you increase the experience, viewing experience of people. And that's where you need larger bandwidth, but it's one bandwidth for the complete content, and which is the most efficient way to do that. I have VR gears available, the contents are available, but that if individually we go, it will be very expensive to really go into even for an ISP, for a CDN operator, for a internet exchange, connected networks. And these are the value adds which definitely will drive the growth of the satellite industry as well. That as there was a movement when we had standard definition to high definition, and now it is basically we have to really create great viewing experiences for all the live events coming up. So that's one aspect, and the other is basically we create edge, active edge kind of thing to improve the viewer experience and get the experience habits of the generations which are now viewing.
Thank you, sir. I've been told by the organizers that we've run out of time, but I had promised a question from the audience, and I had promised Mr. Christopher the first chance. So, sir, if you have a question, now's the time, or else we'll have someone else. Only one question, sir. If Mr. Christopher asks, then sorry for that.
Hello. Thank you. I have no question to challenge anything. But as Mr. Vyas said, we would like to enjoy the TV on a 4K or 8K rather than on a mobile. That is correct. But I am working in Spectrum, so I was coming to the point Mr. Paul has been telling about the convergence. When you change from what you call broadcasting to broadband, how you are going to compete with the terrestrial technologies in the convergence, because they are galloping from 5G to 6G and above. So, but satellite doesn't have any plan to come to the excess side. That is my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think the whole aspect of spectrum is really critical. I mean, it's the lifeblood. It's the infrastructure. It's the framework under which we work. One thing I would highlight is that if you don't have access to a service in a rural context, it's not because the operators do not have spectrum. They just can't afford to put the infrastructure in place, right? It's not a lack of spectrum for 5G and 6G in the last mile. It's a lack of it's that you cannot justify the investment in the infrastructure. So I think what we need to do is to make sure that there is coordinated and access to spectrum, but also coexistence. And that is a technology consideration as well as a policy type consideration. One thing I would just like to touch on, I think that with this consideration with regard to the different bands, there are different frequency bands that we're operating in, whether we're operating in the millimeter wave bands or the low bands, sub 6 gigahertz bands. And I think both are interesting and contended spectrum between the terrestrial and the satellite world, and between BSS and FSS, as we know, and MSS. I think what's interesting is we will see in the future multiple satellite constellations being used to complement the delivery of the terrestrial networks and delivery of services to consumers. It could be that the mobile satellites provide, the LEO satellites provide the interactivity that's required. But the geostationary satellites, or the MEO satellites, provide the essentially the grunt, the capability to deliver content where it's needed in a region. Because one of the challenges that we face is that there's only limited orbital slots, there's only limited orbital shells if you think about it from a LEO perspective, and they all require spectrum. But the interesting thing about the geostationary satellites is that every single asset is being sweated continuously. It is delivering services to the customers that are underneath it. Whereas if you look in the LEO constellation, 90% of the satellites are just charging their batteries. Yeah? So if you want to deliver a national or regional service, the geostationary satellites are really valuable for maximizing the return on investment. And that could be to deliver content to the edge or content to the consumer. And it's really critical that we actually take recognition of the fact that in the future we'll see multiple satellites. And we need to make sure that the regulatory environment encourages essentially coexistence of these systems, which we can solve with technology.
I think that was a great answer. Why? Because I had a question which I was reluctant to ask because of time constraints, which was around NGSOs and GSOs and how both can coexist and still deliver broadcast service. So I think thanks for the question, Christopher sir, and great answer, Paul. There is a coexistence needed, and the regulators need to enable the coexistence so that the right service is delivered through the right orbit and the right spectrum, right? Thanks so much. I think this is a good panel, great discussions. Must thank all the panelists for getting into details in the respective domains. And with that, we end the session here. I'll hand it over to the administrators again.